Hi, it looks like we're live here, and I never quite know exactly what introduction I'm going to use. I just click one, but no doubt any one that I could choose, YouTube would deem offensive and probably would demonetize the video just based on that, if in case somebody filed a complaint with them. So please don't do that. I've been in court, electronic court, virtual court, remote court all afternoon. And I'm not just wearing a coat and a tie just for the fun of it, but I've been literally questioning witnesses over the internet all afternoon. So this is sort of, I think, a therapy to me before I can finish. What I have to wrap up for the day is I have to at least get one rant in about something that's going on in the civil rights world. And what I wanted to talk about is in case you saw it in the news, there's still finding more and more people to prosecute over what happened at January 6th at the Capitol. And I was wrong about something. A while back, I said, this whole mask thing is going to be the end of us. It really is. And I still think that our civilization might come to an end, at least what we've built here in the Western world might come to an end based on what has happened with all of this mask nonsense. But we might not even make it to that, because what's happening now is, I don't think could be dreamed up by George Orwell himself. And that has to do with what we're seeing all around us now, in the news anyways, with the feds in DC and the District of Columbia going after people for their political views. It's basically a political purge that's happening right now. And I've predicted this, but what they're doing is going after every group that they can claim to be a militia group or a so-called white nationalist group or white supremacist group. In this case, the Oathkeepers. And I don't know a whole lot about them. I'd heard about them, but I'm looking at one case in particular that was in the news today, or at least I saw it today. I think it was in the news today. And then I looked up the actual affidavit that the feds filed underneath. And I'm going to go over that. And that's basically all I want to talk about. But this is why you need to know about it, because if you're going to allow them to do that to this one group, and it's not necessarily the group that they're doing it to, and I don't even know all the details on the group. It doesn't matter. All I know is what they put in the affidavit. But they will, it's always a slippery slope. It's always a slippery slope. They'll be coming after group X next, group Y after that, and group Z after that, and then you're after that, after they run out of the alphabet. So if they're allowed to do it now, there's not going to be any limit to their power. And what they're doing is, now that Biden is in control, and this is who the swamp wanted in control, not because probably they like Biden, but they got Trump out of the way because clearly he was anti-bureaucracy. They all hated him. And Biden is pro-bureaucracy. All the bureaucracy supported him. He wants to grow the bureaucracy, and the swamp is basically its own fourth branch of government now. And they are coming after the MAGA crowd that was at the Capitol on January 6th. And they've been threatening for a while now that they were going to put together these so-called sedition cases with any of these groups that they identified who were there at the Capitol. So that's what I'm going to go over. That's what's happening with this one individual that I'm going to go over his documents. But here's where it's going. Not only is Joe Biden there, but we have our very own Joe Manchin now apparently in control. And the only thing standing between the almost communist agenda that they have, or that could be the fascist agenda that they have, of outright universal gun registration and the codification of the mail-in voting, everything that happened in November of 2020. The only thing standing in between us and that is Joe Manchin. And he's our very own senator here in West Virginia. And Manchin, if he waffles on the filibuster, is going to allow all of that, a gun registry. And what's going to happen if they're allowed to complete a gun registry of all gun owners in the United States, and in particular, the people that they're targeting, which is the political opposition of the party currently in power. And that is insurrectionists everywhere. That's what they're gonna see, is insurrectionists everywhere. And guess what? We think we're entitled to a trial by jury, but the way they're going to structure it is exactly what we're seeing. The trial by jury, yeah, there's going to be a jury, but it's going to be a jury in the District of Columbia. It's going to be out of that jury pool that voted, 101% for Joe Biden in 2020. It's going to be the same jury pool that elected a guy who smokes crack with prostitutes as mayor. That is the jury pool that is going to be deciding your fate in these cases that they're going after the so-called insurrectionists in Washington, D.C. So this is Freedom is Scary. I'm John Bryan, West Virginia civil rights lawyer, and this fairly brief episode is brought to you by Proper Number 12. And I want to thank Conor McGregor for sponsoring the show. And since he very graciously did that, I'll have to try it out for the first time here, since it really was a long day in virtual post-coronavirus court. And I promised him that I would do a, sort of a on-air review in my spiffy bullet glass here. It got shot, but fortunately it survived and it still holds liquid. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Rich and smooth, just like advertised. But here's what's going on with this guy that got charged. I'm going to go ahead and get right to the point. Let me share. This is the affidavit in support of criminal complaint. But actually, first, let me show you the news story that I saw, and it was by the Gateway Pundit. Let's see. And it's really a compelling story. And I've talked to a lot of people who were involved, who were there at the Capitol on January 6th, and I've represented some of them. And a lot of people have been canceled over this, especially people in the private sector. They've been fired from their jobs. They've been canceled pretty much in every way. The only people who have had protections are public employees who have a First Amendment right, hopefully, supposedly, to assemble with other like-minded people and protest. Now, so long as they didn't break anything or hurt anybody, or in this case, go inside the Capitol, because they're calling that trespassing, and we can argue about that. But here is the case of Sergeant Kenneth Harrelson. And again, this was from the Gateway Pundit and had this sort of headline: Retired Army Sergeant Kenneth Harrelson arrested for attending January 6th protest. Family bank account locked down. Wife loses her job. They're frightened and don't know what to do. So he got charged for being at the Capitol, and that's what they did. The feds locked down their bank account apparently and charged him and his wife. I'm not sure if this was a GoFundMe or went to social media, but sort of put this plea out there, and this was what I had seen. But she says, my name's Angel. I'm the wife of this retired Army Sergeant, Kenneth Harrelson. He's a 100% disabled veteran. They have a 17-year-old son, 14-year-old daughter, and he was just arrested on Wednesday, March 10th, and they need help. The FBI, city police, and sheriff's office came to their home, executed a search warrant. At the time, her husband was on a ladder cleaning the gutters, and she was inside working virtually at her job, kind of like I did all day today. The agents and officers approached with their guns pointed at my husband. He was unarmed and was in fear of his life. They arrested him without incident and then came to my door with my husband in handcuffs. So it looks like they were there to serve a search warrant. And as I've discussed before, when law enforcement, whether federal or state, executes a search warrant at a residence, they are legally allowed to take people into custody, to handcuff people and who live there, whether or not they're actually suspected of having committed a crime. So that seems to be kind of par for the course for the FBI going after anyone related to the Capitol here. But to continue on, she says she was on a phone with a customer at the time. She hung up and notified her boss that she needed to be excused from work due to a family emergency. And that's when the agents informed her that they were going to search the house and that they would need to remain outside for the duration of the search. I requested to see a copy of the search warrant, but was refused, basically. So I'm not sure what basically means, but they proceeded to escort me outside of my home. I was upset that my things were going to be tossed around everywhere and they would make a huge mess. Tried to search through my photo album of recently deceased mother's photos until I begged them not to. So I decided to video record them while they conducted their search and let them know that I was recording. They started questioning Kenneth, but he requested a lawyer. And so questioning ended and they transported him to the county jail. So the magic word always is, when law enforcement tries to question you, is I want a lawyer, or I need a lawyer. Lawyer is the magic word. You ask for a lawyer, you invoke the right to counsel, and questioning has to cease. And they have to read you your Miranda rights? I get asked this all the time. No. Law enforcement, whether state or federal, they don't have to read you your Miranda rights. But what can't happen is interrogation and police custody. I mean, they could do it, but anything that you say would be inadmissible under the Miranda versus Arizona. I believe it's versus Arizona. That's what your Miranda, or those are what your Miranda rights are. The right to not have anything you say be used against you when you're in custodial interrogation, if you've invoked the right to counsel and they haven't respected that. I stayed at home, or you haven't waived those rights. I stayed at home to await the arrival of our children from school. I mean, clearly they obviously are going after a terrorist here. After they completed their search, they gathered their evidence, which included absurd things like our son's airsoft flashbangs and airsoft grenades that he uses to play airsoft with his junior ROTC friends. They also took a tourniquet that we keep on hand along with other first aid supplies. She notes that she was formerly trained as an EMT and as a CNA. Therefore, she keeps these kinds of supplies on hand at all times. Also took her iPad. These things were at home while he was in D.C., had nothing to do with her husband going there. So we've seen essentially the criminalization of common everyday objects in this quest for them to prosecute all of these so-called insurrectionists. I mean, any sort of potential kind of hit the fan supplies that people commonly carry, at least the prepper types carry, in the context of looking at somebody as a so-called insurrectionist, those become the instrumentalities of an insurrectionist. So a tourniquet or first aid supplies, those become evidence of a crime in this context. So then she talks about what it's going to cost for the legal fees. I immediately began searching for a lawyer. The fee just to retain a local lawyer was $2,500, and it will cost $100,000 if he is indicted on felony charges. Family does not have that kind of money. She ended up getting fired from her job because of this. She was at a loss to do about how to pay the bills, put food on the table, and there's a donation link. So there's a little more. Again, this is the Gateway Pundit. So rather than sort of read all these details, I went ahead and I pulled the affidavit for that sort of is the foundation for the criminal case that the FBI agent filled out and presented to the federal judge in order to get that search warrant. So we can go straight to the source. And I looked at it, and what it shows is that the way they came after this guy is by associating him with this group, the Oathkeepers. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about the Oath Keepers. I've met some of them before, and maybe they've changed, or maybe maybe there's more than one group called the Oath Keepers. I'm not sure. But my last understanding of it was a bunch of like retired military and law enforcement types who had taken an oath when they were serving, and now in their retirement or in their next career or in their private life, they are getting interested in politics and freedom, constitutional liberty issues with the understanding that this is their way of serving now, because they took an oath to serve. They served in their prior capacity, and now they're serving in their private life by advocating for, the Bill of Rights, could be the Second Amendment, could be the First Amendment, whatever. Individual liberties or God-given rights or natural rights. They're keeping their oath. So obviously that's just code speak for white nationalism. That's code speak for white supremacy. That's code speak for a secret group trying to commit an insurrection. It's a secret code for rebellion. And, this is how they came after this guy. So when you look at the evidence against him, it didn't really appear from reading that, all right, was this really just a guy who was at the Capitol and he ends up getting charged, or was he inside the Capitol? So when you look at the evidence, you can see that they have photographs that appear to show him inside the Capitol, but they didn't just stop with that. Here's what they did. They made a conspiracy case against him by tying him to the Oath Keeper group. Now, it appears to me that this is a large group of people all over the country. And there's no, sort of like the Tea Party, there's not just one person directing other people or just different formal chapters. So they tied him to just the general group of the Oath Keepers. And then they used the behavior of a particular group of Oath Keepers who I believe were in Virginia. And there are photographs of them dressed up and in a stack, what they call going into the Capitol, and who really were dumb enough to leave an electronic trail of all sorts of ridiculous communications before and during that process, which allows them to make the case that they were, so-called insurrectionists. And you'll see that this guy wasn't even part of that group, according to the allegations by the FBI agent. He just was a part of the general group, the Oath Keepers. And then they used the behavior of these particular guys, and they liked those facts. And I'm sure they've gone after all those guys individually, but they liked those facts. And then just using the word Oath Keepers, they tied him to them. And so now, instead of just another guy that sort of, unwisely bumbled into the Capitol on January 6th, now he is being imputed with having said basically all the things that they said. And I'll show you what it is that they said. This is the affidavit. Let me share it here. All right, so affidavit in support of criminal complaint. And see, you heard what I said, District of Columbia. So this guy, I believe he's from Titusville, Florida. And that's where I just was for about a week ago. I grew up around there. And one of my favorite restaurants in the world, Dixie Crossroads, is right there in Titusville, Florida, right off I-95. So I'm very familiar with Titusville, Florida, and there's lots of patriots in that area. But this guy is not being charged there. Look where he's being charged, the District of Columbia. And that's something that people need to get in their heads, because that's another thing that the Biden regime is looking to do with all this gun registry stuff. It's not about stopping the criminals in downtown Chicago who aren't going to obey any of these laws. It's not about stopping them. It's about stopping the MAGA crowd, the Oath Keeper crowd, the even the Thin Blue Line crowd, ironically, the former military crowd. the white male crowd, basically, that in their words are the white nationalists. But again, this also applies because it's always a slippery slope. It's going to apply to hurt everybody of every creed, every ethnicity. And in the end, we know that you all get thrown out of the helicopter at some point. You may not be the first thrown out of the helicopter, but you'll either be thrown out of the helicopter or put up against the wall, even if you think you're the right skin tone, even if you think you're the right this, that, and the other. But here's the affidavit, and this is basically the sworn under oath testimony of this FBI agent who is reciting the allegations to this federal judge to try to get the arrest warrant, the search warrant. Of this is the evidence he's obtained, and this is why. And the standard here is probable cause. This is why he alleges there's probable cause to proceed with this criminal case. But what I'm saying is this prosecution is going to take place in Washington, D.C. It's not going to take place in Titusville. It's not going to take place in Brevard County, Florida, where he's going to have a real jury of his peers or a chance at having a jury of his peers. It's going to take place with a jury of the same folks that voted 103% for Joe Biden. So, and you can take a look at what's happening with the trial right now in Wisconsin to see exactly how fair and how screwed up that process can become if you have prosecutors and judges who are interested in politicizing it. So this is the affidavit. You know, we can read all the internet stories we want for these types of cases, but you got to go straight to the source. So what do we know? There was a federal grand jury on February 19th in Washington, D.C. And by then they had already charged a lot of people. But this is where this case was presented. So he believes there's probable cause that these crimes were committed. Basically, they make a conspiracy case. And so here's his background as a special agent, and this is what his experience is and why the judge should give him some deference. And they go through the facts of this is what happened on January 6, 2020. Congress was getting together to certify the electoral votes, blah, blah, blah. And then there's this, quote, attack at the U.S. Capitol. All right. So here are the allegations. And still, these are sort of general. You can see these are kind of copy and paste from some of the other cases, really. You got to go down some to get to him. Oathkeepers militia. So they're calling it a militia here. All right, Oathkeepers militia. All right, look who they cite. Law enforcement and news media organizations observe that members of an organization known as the Oathkeepers were among the individuals and groups who forcibly entered the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Oathkeepers are a large but loosely organized collection of individuals, some of whom are associated with militias. All right, the Oathkeepers militia is the title of the section, but now it says under oath, it's a loosely organized collection of individuals. All right, individuals, that's not what comes to mind when I'm thinking of militia or conspiracy. But all right, individuals, some of whom are associated with militias. All right, some of whom are associated with militias. Some, and here we go again. Here's that word again. Some members of the Oathkeepers believe that the federal government is being co-opted by a cabal of elites. This is where they mock them, have been co-opted by a cabal of elites actively trying to strip American citizens of their rights. Well, I mean, technically, call it a cabal. All right, are elites actively trying to strip American citizens of their rights? I mean, pretty much Joe Biden has admitted to that, as has Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I don't know. Is that probable cause for anything? Though the Oathkeepers will accept anyone as members, they'll accept anyone as members. They explicitly focus on recruiting current and former military, law enforcement, and first responder personnel. The organization's name alludes to the oath sworn by members of the military and police to defend the Constitution, quote, from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Oathkeepers are led by person one. All right, so this is secret, basically unnamed guy that they're putting in there. Person one. All right, so here's where they come to. I kind of had to take a double take when I looked at this. All right, see the guy in the green right there? I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but the guy in the green circle face, that's this guy, Kenneth, that they're going after. That's him. This is outside the Capitol. And the red oval showing the guys with the helmets and the plate carriers and some camo hats. They've got, looks like their hand on each other's shoulders. That is this particular group of Oathkeepers that they tied this guy to. So I'm looking at this picture and I'm thinking, all right, so he's one of the guys in the red. All right, he was in this stack of guys. And it's like, wait, no, he's actually the green guy. So wait a minute. Oh, what does he have to do with these guys? It just looks like he's in a crowd and shouting. So they explain he explains in a widely disseminated video recorded by a photojournalist on January 6, 2021, a quote stack of individuals dressed in matching uniforms consisting of camouflage combat attire to include confirmed Oathkeeper members moves up and through a crowd on the east side of the U.S. Capitol. Screenshot of the videos below with a portion of the quote stack encircled by a red oval and Harrelson, who this affidavit is about, in a green circle. Based upon my training and experience, a stack or line formation is a tactical formation used by infantry in the military. One defining feature of this is they keep their hands on their backs or vests of the person in front of them to remain together while entering a room or weaving through a crowd. Blah, blah, blah. So, all right. So these guys are in a stack, whatever. What does it have to do with Harrelson? All right. A service called News to Share uploaded a YouTube video on January 6th of the attack at the Capitol. All right. So at the approximate 3-minute and 8-second mark, the video shows 8 to 10 individuals in matching uniforms consisting of camouflage, combat attire. Now, that may have been why the judges at the Fourth Circuit in my argument here a week ago were asking me about my client's clothing. And did it look like militia? And that's where we're headed right now in this 2021 environment where one side is being purged and the other side is not. They're worried about sleeveless shirts, cargo pants, camouflage pants, and your protections according to the Bill of Rights could fluctuate depending on the type of clothing that you're wearing is what they're getting at. So if it looks militia-ish, then you may have a few less rights is the whole point. But here's the thing. Could you imagine flipping the facts around and to say, all right, this is an affidavit for a search warrant or arrest warrant or criminal charges for a BLM member. And they go into the clothing, and this is, he's got a hoodie on. Oh my God. He was wearing a hoodie. He had baggy pants on. You could see his underwear sticking up in the back. Can you imagine? Would you ever see that in one of these affidavits? Hell no, you wouldn't. You would not. In a million years would they do that. But will they do it the other way around based on skin color? Based on political ideology? Absolutely they would. And that's exactly what's happening here. And they're doing it right in front of your eyes. That's what you're looking at. So matching uniforms, camouflage, combat attire, Oathkeeper logos and insignia can be seen moving in organized and practiced fashion. So again, what does this have to do with Harrelson? All I saw up here is he's just in a crowd. What does this have to do with Harrelson? Well, I don't see anything. This is all just about these particular guys who all identify as Oathkeepers. So a close-up view of the badges, and here they go into the actual the flare basically that they have on their clothing. So they actually go through these things. So one of them has an emblem on his shirt displaying the Oathkeepers motto, "Not on our watch." The badge also says, "I don't believe in anything. I'm just here for the violence." So what happened to the First Amendment? Is it ironic that there's dudes at the U.S. Capitol protesting who claim to want to protect the Bill of Rights, the constitutional rights, including, the most importantly, the First Amendment. And ironically, they're finding their expressions that they are wearing on their clothing now being used against them in a criminal affidavit written up by the FBI, actually going, showing pictures. This is a picture of the patches, the Velcro patches that they have on their clothing, which may or may not be a joke or hyperbole or serious or just halfway serious. But here we are. That's where we've arrived. I don't believe in anything. I'm just here for the violence. Guardians of the Republic, not on our watch. All right. So based on the foregoing observations of the video, and again, this is of the Oathkeeper dudes. This is not our guy. And information gained in the course of my investigation, it is reasonable to believe that the organized group of individuals marching to the doors of the Capitol in the video are members and affiliates of the Oathkeepers. All right. On January 6th, the particular Capitol doors through which this stack of Oathkeepers and other members of the crowd were breached were significantly damaged. Multiple panes of glass were smashed and a door handle was missing or broken off. Damage is estimated over $1,000. Okay. $1,000 of damage. Let's not talk about the $1 billion of damage or more that were caused all over the country by the left side of the equation that the FBI didn't seem to care about at all. Here we have $1,000. Now, wherever is the federal government going to get $1,000 to fix the door? So here they have an entire section now, still not about Harrelson, conspirators. These are the guys in that stack: Watkins, Crowell, Caldwell, Sandra Parker, Benny Parker, Young, Steele, Kelly Meggs, and Connie Meggs. This is where they go over them, and still nothing about our guy. And it looks like, some of them are related, maybe husband and wife, lives in Virginia. And this is where they go into their communications, their electronic trail, to make this case against them. So they called themselves a, quote, quick reaction force in their communications. And they had stated among themselves that they were going to monitor the attack at the Capitol from a distance. I'm sure they called it an attack. And be prepared to travel to the Capitol in the event they were called upon, possibly well armed. And where does that come from? Is this or is this not an affidavit under oath? What do you mean possibly? Where does that come from? Do you just assume that, right? All right. Caldwell also provided maps for the QRF team how to respond from their staging area. So here's the real incriminating stuff. They traveled together by car from Ohio to a home in Virginia belonging to Thomas Caldwell. And then from Virginia, the group drove to Washington, D.C. in advance of the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. All right. So Young lives in Florida. Steele lives in North Carolina. They're siblings. Young flew from blah, 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 blah. All right. Kelly Meggs, Connie Meggs are a married couple who live in Florida. Again, what's the connection here with this guy that this is about? It's not explained. All right. FBI has obtained an audio recording of Zello communications. Note to self, if you're going to commit insurrection in the future, don't use Zello communications. The FBI is on to you if you are. Between Watkins and other suspected Oathkeepers during the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. All right. Zello is a push-to-talk application. I'd never heard of it, that operates like a walkie-talkie on a cell phone. Zello application may, depending on the user settings, store recordings and other information about the user's communication on the user's phone. So here we go. Hat tip from the FBI. You can change your settings so that it doesn't store it for the FBI. So during the recorded transmission, believed to be among Watkins and other Oathkeepers on the Zello channel called Stop the Steal J6, they had the following exchanges. And so this is what's coming back to bite Harrelson. And again, you haven't seen Harrelson's name mentioned in here because these are totally different people. Yet this has found its way into the affidavit against Harrelson. So here's what these people did that got Harrelson in trouble. So they're talking over Zello on Stop the Steal J6, their secret chat room that the FBI had no trouble finding. So at the approximate 5-minute mark, well, what were they talking about for minutes 1 through 4? But details. The voice believed to be Watkins reports, "We have a good group. We have about 30 or 40 of us. We're sticking together and sticking to the plan." An individual responds, "We'll see you soon, Jess. Jess airborne." All right, the approximate 7-minute and 44-second mark, an unknown male states, "You are executing citizen's arrest. Arrest this assembly. We have probable cause for acts of treason, election fraud." The voice believed to be Watkins responds, "We are in the mezzanine. We are in the main dome right now. We are rocking it. They're throwing grenades. They're freaking shooting people with paintballs, but we are in here." An individual responds to Watkins, telling her to be safe, and states, "Get it, Jess. Do your effing thing. This is what we effing unintelligible up for. Everything we effing trained for." All right, so that is an unknown male talking to Jess. So, or Watkins, believed to be Watkins talking to Jess. And so now we have a conversation between Watkins and Caldwell that they found from back on December 30th. Watkins and Caldwell. And they're talking about what's going to happen on January 6th. And so we have this message. All right. At least one full bus of 40 plus people coming from North Carolina. Another group, unclear if Mississippi guys, also a bus. Blah, 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 blah. We got all these buses coming. And we've got a room at Comfort Inn. I mean, this was actually pretty tame. Broken down all day, committed to being the quick reaction force. Now, if something goes to hell, now, is there a difference between, all right, on January 6th, we're going to break the doors down to the Capitol and we're going to storm in, we're going to go in Nancy Pelosi's office, and we're going to do that, basically. Now, is there a difference between that and, all right, there's going to be, a couple 100,000 people at the Capitol? We expect Antifa could be there. There might be some violence between the protesters and Antifa. And if somebody needs help, we know we can't depend on the police. We're going to go be a quick reaction force to help people. Now, is there a difference? Well, one, they're making the case for a revolution against the United States and armed insurrection. And the other one, well, it could be advocating for unlawful conduct, but it has nothing to do with trying to overthrow Joe Biden from being elected president of the United States. I mean, it's absolutely one has nothing to do with the other. So a quick reaction force, that could be any sort of innocuous things. I mean, it could be a bunch of paramedics that, want to tend to people in case there's violence. I mean, who knows? All right. So I'll bring them in on his truck. I just got a text from him. He was able to book a room in the hotel. Blah, 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 blah. It was great to see you again. I sure hope your arm is getting better. I mean, does the FBI not have something better to do? And I mean, these two dudes talking about, great to see you again. I sure hope your arm is better. Nothing in there. And not that this is even the guy they're talking about. This is a completely different guy. But this is all they were able to find on this guy is just two other guys. We're talking about, I hope your arm is better. And yeah, we are going to be a quick reaction force. And if you're a quick reaction force, how about this? If you're going to storm the Capitol, isn't that more, I'm not military, but isn't that more of an assault? Like you're an assault force, you're an assaulter. If you're a quick reaction force, I mean, you're like, you're coming in if something else that's supposed to happen goes wrong or they need help. Like you're planning on not coming, but you're only coming if there's a problem. So that sort of flies in the face. If you're a quick reaction force, it flies in the face of a plan to storm the Capitol. Again, just details that shouldn't get in the way of what's really happening here. So here we go. Statement of facts supporting probable cause. This is where they get to this guy. All right. Kenneth Harrelson is a 41-year-old resident of Titusville, Florida. So he's about my age. He's from the county that I grew up in. And I don't recognize him. maybe he's not from there, but 41 years old, from Titusville. And here is all the damning evidence against him. All right. An individual matching the description of him appears in the New York Times article tracking the Oathkeepers who attacked the Capitol. Okay. I had all these people at the New York Times, Chris Cuomo, all these people contacted me, Alexandria Pelosi, all of them, trying to contact any of my clients who were at the Capitol on January 6th. And it was all, we're doing this article or this documentary on the white supremacist and the insurrectionists at the Capitol. And I'm like, look, the real folks who I talked to who were at the Capitol, I mean, they're much less exciting than what you want to put in your story. I mean, we're talking about, school bus drivers and school teachers and just regular folks who really aren't even as exciting as belonging to something called the Oathkeepers. But they were determined, and they're still determined, to just sensationalize anything and everything having to do with what happened on January 6th, because they'll never let it go. That was their Reichstag fire. In the real Reichstag fire, they caught the guy who set the fire like the next day. The Nazi party, the Nazi Socialist Party, they weren't going to say, "Oh, we caught him. Good job. Let's get back on track to what we were doing the day before." No. Just like Saul Alinsky says, and just like Rahm Emanuel says, and Hillary Clinton says, they're not going to let any good crisis go to waste, especially not what happened on January 6th. I mean, the actual real Trump supporters who were there, and it was a mix of people. I mean, they really took the bait. The doors being opened, the gates being pushed aside. They're like, yeah, come in. And they fell for it. They went in. And I have no doubt that wasn't planned. When the doors are opening and, they're letting you closer and closer. I mean, they're obviously giving them all the rope they needed to hang themselves. So back to this guy, and why is the New York Times mentioned in a affidavit to a judge? But one of the New York Times images shows an individual who appears to be Harrelson facing the military-style stack formation. All right, the same video. All right, without the circles, or the same picture. Now, what the hell is that? I mean, look at all the people that are like darked out. Like, what about them? It's just this random guy is in trouble now because there's a stack of people. What does he have to do with them? All right, the stack's moving up towards the Capitol. All right, there's a picture of him again. Video footage from AP News shows Harrelson interacting with these individuals as they move up towards the stack. Really? All right, so we see a couple helmets there. There's a guy in a helmet, camo helmet, can't see his face. There's a guy in a camo helmet, also with a beard, sunglasses, can't make out who he is. And then there's our guy supposedly standing there doing the same thing he's doing in every picture, which just kind of shouting at the clouds. All right. Surveillance video from inside the Capitol. And this is sort of where I realized that, all right, well, I understand he was charged. He was inside the Capitol, and they've charged everyone they've identified that I know about inside the Capitol. Surveillance video from inside the Capitol shows this stack of Oathkeepers and other members of the crowd. Well, why aren't they all Oathkeepers? Shortly after they breached and damaged the doors of the Capitol. All right, so now they have our guy in here. Where is he? All right, Kenneth Harrelson. All right, yeah, that one's pretty sketchy. So they have him at the very bottom left down there, and doesn't appear to be shouting. I guess there's no clouds inside now to shout at. So he's not shouting any longer. He's just sort of walking. But then here's our stack of dudes. He's not with them. There's been no connection to them so far. All right, next picture. Members of the stack of Oathkeepers that forcibly entered the Capitol, then congregated inside the north section of the rotunda. All right, but what do I care? We're here about Harrelson. All right, next paragraph. Surveillance video from inside the Capitol, January 6th, shows a person consistent with Harrelson, along with other members of the Oathkeepers. All right, so let's assume that is Harrelson. All right, he's walking towards the camera, and there's a guy with a helmet on and a backpack facing the other direction. So it doesn't look like he's going in the same direction as them. I don't know. If that's all they got, that's pretty flimsy. While inside the rotunda, a photojournalist took a picture of Young and Harrelson. All right, so Young is a different guy. I guess they charged him in a different deal. But Harrelson, our guy in the green, right there in the middle, taking a picture inside the rotunda of the Capitol. All right, so there's not a picture of him hurting anybody or destroying anything, or even in any sort of stack of guys that they were talking about. He's just sort of standing there and taking pictures like everybody else. So now we have other, quote, open source photographs received by the FBI of other alleged affiliated Oath Keepers outside the Capitol that day. So now they've identified both this guy Young and now Kelly Meggs, Steele, and then Harrison Green Arrow. All right. So there's Harrison in the background there. So where is, I recognize the name Kelly Meggs, Blue Arrow. I don't see where the blue arrow is coming down on this guy's head. So Kelly must be a guy. I see. All right. So there's Kelly. All right. So outside the Capitol. All right. So got him standing near these guys, a couple of them. All right. So is that it? All right. Reviewed his records, including driver's license, photograph, and appears to be the same person. All right. Got the Verizon records from Kelly Meggs. All right. Let's see. AT&T records showed that the number ending in 0136 is registered to Harrelson at an address in Titusville. All right. So the carrier for the phone number ending in 1036 is AT&T. So AT&T gives the phone records. Verizon gives the phone records. So what do the phone records say? All right. There's phone calls going in between at least one of those guys and our guy, if those are the right numbers. All right. What was said? We don't know. But we know what was said in something else. And this is where they really tied him to these guys. So they got an email address, Hot Rod at Yahoo, and they found that the Yahoo records registered to Kenneth Harrelson, and also that was the same phone number. And they were able to figure out that there was a go-to meeting. All right. So this guy supposedly went to a go-to meeting with, looks like a couple hundred people. And the user named Gator6 was the organizer for the meeting titled DC Planning Call on January 3rd, 2021. The user Gator6 accessed the meeting from a mobile device using the same IP address ending in 158. And the user listed himself as residing in Titusville, Florida. Same IP address ending in 158, attended or organized approximately 30 meetings on GoToMeeting affiliated with the Oath Keepers using the same name. All right, so that's it. So there's no connection to any of the incriminating stuff that these other guys said. And it was pretty stupid of them to say that, you're under arrest for treason, et cetera, et cetera. And they allegedly said this when they were in the Capitol, and there was a record of that. And they were seen going into the Capitol in this stacked military style. So the entire affidavit is about these other people. And they're like, but yeah, look, it appears that this other dude's phone called him once, and also participated in some GoToMeeting call with them a few times. So they're using the name Oath Keepers and the organization, the quote Oath Keepers, and they're allowed to assemble with each other, are they not? You're allowed to assemble with other like-minded people politically. That's a part of the First Amendment. But they're taking protected activity, assembling, protesting, and then they're turning it into an insurrection or illegal activity, and they're doing it by pointing at the activity of others. So that's why they've charged them with conspiracy here. And the moral of the story is that any of these groups they're coming after. I mean, and they're making they're going to attribute the actions of anyone that they get the goods on, the communications on, of any of those individuals. And they're going to impute them to anyone who wore a T-shirt with that name on it or participated in a Zoom call. I mean, how many Zoom calls or GoToMeeting calls did the Oathkeepers ever have? I mean, maybe that's all they do is get together and do these things. It's like them trying to make the case that anyone who organized a bus to go to the Capitol was committing sedition or engaged in insurrection, which is ridiculous. I mean, some of my clients had ridden the bus that was chartered by the Conservative Ladies Club. And it's just absolutely outrageous that's being framed as participating in insurrection. Yeah, Billy, the Oathkeepers is the new Boogaloo Boys. Yeah, I mean, and I think the Boogaloo Boys were sort of. I mean, wasn't that sort of a joke? I didn't even know if that was serious. I mean, they were kind of just, I think, halfway joking around with all of that. But there's actually like four, real white supremacists in the country, and two of them are on, and the Dave Chappelle shows that don't air anymore, and in reality, they just label anyone that is on the right to be a white supremacist or a white nationalist. With really, I mean, heck, the head dude of some of these things, I mean, they're black guys. So it's absolutely, it's nothing but purging and prosecuting the political opposition. And why even the left is going along with it, I don't know, because like I said, they're gonna be thrown out of the helicopter, put against the wall just the same. And I think Jeremiah, that's a good point. That only Trump supporters are being arrested, and that's what I think I'm seeing people really upset about. Is the regular person, the regular Trump supporter, or the person who was there on January 6th had nothing to do with the people who went inside, or the idiots who broke stuff, or engaged in violence. Had nothing to do with it. But really, that was minor compared to the entire year that we just watched cities across the country burning, and a federal courthouse attacked. The police officers attacked with lasers in their eyes. I mean, there were people shot and killed, and nothing was done. Nothing was done. Still nothing is done. And now they're throwing the entire weight of the FBI, of the federal government, against just any Trump supporter that they can put anywhere inside that Capitol, and or in communication with anyone inside the Capitol. And are they doing it because they really believe that they're insurrectionists? No, they know that wasn't an insurrection. I mean, hell, in the history of the world, I can't think of one insurrection that involved a group of unarmed people, much less against the greatest power, both in terms of law enforcement and military, that has ever existed, that we have in the United States. I mean, was it insurrection? I mean, a couple hundred people at most, who were almost all unarmed, going inside the Capitol where doors are being opened. Is that really an insurrection? No, of course it's not an insurrection. At best, it was a riot. Maybe it was even disturbing the peace, property destruction, or trespassing, depending on who did what. But no honest person really thinks that was an insurrection. If it was an insurrection, gosh, it should have been successful. I mean, if 100 or 200 people who were unarmed were able to go in and go where they wanted and take what they wanted, imagine what would have happened if they were all armed, or if there was 1,000 people that were armed that wanted to commit an insurrection. It would have been very easy, wouldn't it? Assuming that it wasn't all just a setup to begin with. Let's see. To check, the Patriot Act is given the vast amount of power to go after certain people who hold opposite political views. Yeah, the Patriot Act I think we'll see the Patriot Act on steroids really at this point. I mean, the Patriot Act was awful. I mean, what did we learn after the Patriot Act is that was just mostly used on our own citizens, not on actual terrorists. And in fact, I have a client now who's charged under our very own statute in West Virginia against terrorism. It's called terroristic threats. And what did this terrorist do? Well, I think he was born and raised in West Virginia, and he's never been to Yemen, but he retweeted a tweet with a wanted poster of our tyrannical governor on it, and it said something to the effect of time to bring back time to bring back corporal punishment for people who violate the Constitution or something like that. And so now he's a terrorist. That's who I think they prosecuted in our state, an elderly lady who called in a bomb threat or something like that. That was not even real. I mean, I don't think there's been one real terrorist who's been prosecuted. And West Virginia's post 9/11 terrorist criminal felony statute, and I would bet in many states it's the same way. See, Catherine, I guarantee nothing has happened to those voter ID protesters that stormed the Georgia Capitol a few weeks ago. Most people don't even know that it happened. Well, not only that, but what they're protesting is about to be codified into federal law with that HR 1 or whatever it is that Manchin is going to possibly give them. So West Virginia, for instance, won't even be able to require a voter ID to vote. It will be the federal mandate or federal law that people have to be able to vote by mail. And why would we want that? And I've made this point to somebody this weekend that if you look at the United Nations website, they send poll watchers or election observers to all these third world countries who are trying to put together actual elections that aren't rigged. And so they have a guidebook that they use to teach all of their election observers that says this is the guide to fair and free elections, and these are the things that they need to stay away from. So it's funny because all the things that they warn against, and this is from the UN, all the things they warn against is everything that the Democrats are trying to get codified into federal law right now, and that is sort of mail-in absentee voting. And the UN actually warns against electronic voting machines. That there's a big worry and big danger of fraud with electronic voting machines. Pretty much everything that happened in 2020 was in violation of the European Union's guide for poll watchers and these third world countries. I mean, it would be funny. It would be a joke if it wasn't real. Yeah, exactly. Also, Nate, no purges of the rolls. And in other words, how many dead people are accruing on these voter rolls every day because people die every day. I mean, especially of COVID, right? So we should have over 500,000 people that should be off voter rolls around the country. And how much do you want to bet they all voted for Joe Biden? They're all on the voter rolls, and these Democrats want them to vote in 2022 and 2024. And who wouldn't want dead people to be off voter rolls? Ask yourself that. Who wouldn't want someone to have to show ID to vote when you have to show ID to do anything and everything else? I mean everything you have to show ID for. To get on an airplane, to do anything, you have to show ID. But yet to vote, you don't. Why is that? Obviously, it's because the Democrats perceive that fraud is going to help them. We could even vote by blockchain using our phone or PC. Voter suppression does not make a democracy. If we can't see our vote with a tally or social security number, then it's a scam. It's been a scam. Electors elect, voters do not. Need a national ID card. Democrat lady, hello. And Democrat lady, why is it a good thing to have voter ID laws? Like, why should we let somebody vote who is not able to produce an ID so that we can verify who they are? There's only one reason. There's only one reason. And that is because we want to promote the possibility of people who may not be real or may be not even U.S. citizens of voting. That's the only reason. I mean, you can't say that it's because, it's suppressing a minority population because black people or brown people can't be expected to produce an ID. I mean, how racist is that, or how bigoted is that? That's the bigotry of lowered expectations. I mean, give me a break. You have to have an ID to drive, and we arrest you if you're driving without an ID. Unless you're an illegal alien, then we can't arrest you for not having ID. When I was a prosecutor in North Carolina, we had quite a few illegal aliens every day who were coming through the courts who had been pulled over. And I had wondered about this before I was there, or maybe before I was involved in the law, is, well, what happens, what do you do if you're an illegal alien? What happens if you get pulled over at a traffic stop? I mean, wouldn't they know? And how do you have ID? Well, in reality, the way this was working, and this was a while ago, but they had fake IDs. They all had fake IDs, and there was a whole industry of fake IDs, and everybody knew it. The cops knew it, the prosecutors knew it, but they were tracked by their fake IDs. So they would take the fake ID and use the stats on it, and primarily the date of birth that was given, and they track it. And so you know that this is this person's third driving while revoked for DUI or DWI in North Carolina. And we know that because we've tracked the same fake ID through all 4 times this guy was drunk driving without a license. And yeah, we don't necessarily know his real name, but we know that this is basically, a legal alien, John Doe, that we've tracked through his, the information that's in his fake ID. And the one thing you were not allowed to do is to do anything about the status of being illegally in the country. I mean, the feds, you didn't tell the feds that you're not allowed to do that. They don't do anything about it. So you just play along with their fake ID. And that was really, really, I never would have guessed that that's how it's done. Maybe it's done differently now. I suspect not. Keisha, I sort of agree with you that, yeah, national ID could be a good thing. But when I hear national ID, that also, I think of, all right, Joe Biden wants us to all have a national ID. And you phrase it in those terms, like, no, I don't want it. I don't want a national ID if it's Joe Biden's idea. And that gets me to kind of where all this is going. And this wasn't really about voting, but it has to do with the filibuster. Manchin, if he caves on the filibuster, it is going to allow all this gun control and all this election control. But the most dangerous thing is the gun control. So there's going to be, the worst part about it is the fact that it's going to set up a gun registry. So yeah, you can possess guns. You can exercise your Second Amendment right. Only if, you've complied with all these rules, and where they're going to outlaw a father giving his son his, a firearm, or grandpa giving his grandson a firearm, or whatever, or buying a firearm between 2 private people. And therefore there's going to be a government paper trail with this background check before every single firearm transaction, not even a purchase. And so what's that going to allow them to do is very easily have this national gun registry where everybody's going to be a part of it, and they're going to know what guns you have, what guns, they'll probably try to eventually make it illegal to have anything that's, not in the registry. So something that was a private sale prior to this legislation. But once they have everybody registered, I mean, it's sort of, I hate to even go there, but look what happened in 1930s Germany. What did they start with? Did they just go from 0 to 60? No, it was a slow increase. And what always comes before all your, before they take away everything you have, or even your life, before they even get near that, they have to organize you. They have to, they get there slowly, but it starts with organization and documentation. So they have to keep track of you in some way. So they make you wear certain things, sort of like wearing a mask. But they give you a number, so they know what you have, and then they can come and take it anytime that they want, or they can use it. And that's why I'm comparing it to what's happening here is on down the road, is they can make the case that you're an insurrectionist, or that you're a militia member, or you're a white nationalist. And that's where we're headed. Anybody who's patriotic, anybody who talks favorably about the founding fathers or the founding of America as a country, we're slowly getting to the point where those people are going to be the white nationalists, the white supremacists, the insurrectionists, the militia members, because America was founded on racism, and you look up to those ideals, and that lands you on this list. And look, also, by the way, as supporting evidence in our affidavit to search your home and maybe incarcerate you, look, these are all the weapons that you have. These are all the firearms that you have. And some of those are weapons of war. And that's what Democrats call the AR-15, the most commonly and widely owned firearm in America now. And we in America, who love freedom anyways, we love our AR-15 style rifles for any number of reasons, and none of which are your business. But those are all going to land all of us on a list of being in possession of weapons of war. And then if you're also in possession of camouflage pants, that probably heightens your score on their scorecard. And this is sort of like China, where we're headed. Is you're probably Uncle Joe is going to end up giving us each a score. So it's like a white nationalist, white supremacist scorecard. So if you've got at least one AR-15, like you're already 100, and you could be like, I'd probably be a 487. Just based on AR-15 ownership. Then you add in, well, how many pairs, like you wear camouflage pants. You have sleeveless. I got a sleeveless shirt with a skull. It's got a skull on it with a knife right through the skull. And I have another sleeveless shirt. The hell, I got a shirt with an AR-15 on it. And it's got skeleton hands, and it has some kind of secret symbol on it. I mean, that's the road we're heading down. We're all going to have a scorecard, just like they have in China, a social credit score, where if you criticize the regime, your score is going to be lowered. And so if your score is not high enough, you won't be able to travel where you want to. You won't be able to get into the universities you want to get into. You won't be able to do any number of things, get a loan. That's the road we're heading down, and that's the opposite of freedom. And the people leading us in that direction, they're the ones that are saying that they're progressives, that they're liberals. Well, look up what the word liberal means, or the word progressive, what that means. That is the opposite direction. They're actually acting just like fascists. Fascists and communists, they have that in common, is they allow no dissent. They suppress all dissent. They don't allow firearm ownership by the peons, by the peasants. They don't allow the freedom of the free exchange of ideas. They don't allow those things. If you don't believe me, do some research. And hell, even if you don't like the research, you can just read, for instance, The Animal Farm by George Orwell, possibly my favorite book, an allegory of beginning until disaster in Soviet Russia from World War II on through the Cold War era. And that's the direction that we're being led now, which is completely opposite of the entire point of why our country exists. Fish. Sorry, I couldn't get to more questions, but I need this guy on my side. How much of a retainer does he require? Well, that's a trick question, Fish, because it depends. It depends. Where you are and what you need done and what's going on. So I only practice, fortunate for me, in West Virginia. So I unless you're in West Virginia, I probably can't help you. But also, I'm completely swamped here in West Virginia. So there's not a whole lot new that I can take on. But I appreciate the question. Elizabeth, I love America because we're rich in cultural background. That's absolutely true. And the thing that you need to shoot back with when they call America a race built on a racist country. Well, who was the second president of the United States? Just for instance, who was the second president of the United States? John Adams. Okay, how many slaves did John Adams own? And you can ask that to whatever anti-American you're listening to give a diatribe. And the fact is that, all right, there's one of our greatest founding fathers, John Adams, who actually was a lawyer who represented the British soldiers who were involved in the so-called Boston Massacre. And he didn't own slaves. I mean, there were parts of the country that didn't own slaves. And there's all sorts of stories that the communist teachers won't teach our kids anymore, such as, I mean, the original colonies were actually, land-wise, a very small area. We look at Ohio, and I've been going to Ohio a lot, learning a lot more about Ohio, but heck, Ohio was part of, read about how they became a state. There's a really good book by one of these great historians. His name escapes me. He's not Ambrose, but anyways, it's about the founding of Marietta, Ohio. Can't recall what it's called. I have it around here somewhere, but it's a great book. But it kind of talks about, if you read the origin story of Ohio, this was sort of a compromise between the slave states, the non-slave states in New England. For instance, Massachusetts, where John Adams was from, who did not want to expand slavery as the United States expanded, and the southern states, or the tobacco states that did want to expand slavery because the economy for tobacco ran on slavery. And so they really, the non-slave states in the North, Massachusetts, they won out in creating this federal legislation that says, all right, these new territories, the Northwest territories, if we have enough settlers in there, they can petition to become a state. And this is the way it's going to be done, and it's not going to be a slave state. And so that's why Ohio was never a slave state. I'm simplifying it some, but so there was this effort by much of our country, including some of our very first leaders, to make sure that a substantial part of our country, as it expands, would not have any slavery. And so it's just absolutely not true that we were this, we have this evil beginning. And the second thing is that where else in the world was more free? I mean, we were created by England. We were created by England, and they made us as slave colonies, or some of them. And Virginia even tried to limit slavery or outlaw slavery in Parliament, and King George III said no. And you won't hear about it from the commie teachers, but that was actually part of the Declaration of Independence and the 27 grievances that we submitted to England. And part of that is that, look, we're not even allowed to limit slavery. You created us as a slave colony, and we can't even control it. So that's how we were created, by the elites from Europe. So they created that aspect of it. And where else in the world was more free and democratic than America as of the founding of America? Nowhere. In England, was slavery legal in England? You bet your ass it was. England is, I mean, these are the elites that imported on slave ships Africans in bondage into our country, and then into South America and Central America, where there were even more than they brought to the American colonies. But yet somehow America is responsible for the evils, all the evils of slavery that existed throughout world history. And it's just not true. It was English corporations that brought the majority of slaves into North America post like 1650. And when did England outlaw slavery? Well, it was long after our Constitution. It was actually like 1840s, late 1830s, 1840s. So slavery was not illegal in England until around that time. And heck, we were only a decade or two away from the American Civil War at that point. So it's just an absolute fiction that there was anywhere else on the planet that was more free, or that there was any way to even start our country off in a way that we could fend off the British Empire by from day one saying, all right, well, we're gonna do away with the slavery that the British created. But anyways, that's for a different video. So it's getting late. I appreciate you watching. That is my rant for what the hell day is it? I've been in Zoom court all day long, so I've forgotten what the day is. So that is, let's see. I've got a couple of big cases I'm getting ready to file, and that you'll hear about very soon. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and make sure to check the notifications to notify you when I go live, because sometimes there's very little notification. And also, if you're following on or watching on Facebook, make sure that you're following and also subscribe to notifications. And if you want to get a hold of me, the info is all on the website, thecivilrightslawyer.com. So until next time, again, that was Freedom is Scary, episode number 48, which I need to start uploading those as podcasts again. I used to do that, but I've also got some good ideas for some guests coming up when I'm able to get caught up and bring them on. So again, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.